What would you do if you discovered that the quiet teenager living in your spare room had been rejected by 17 different families? What if her worn duffel bag contained everything she owned in the world, and her eyes held the kind of pain that comes from being unwanted for too long? This is the extraordinary true story of Maya Rodriguez, a 17-year-old girl who had given up hope of ever finding a real home. For years, she'd been passed from one temporary placement to another, always the outsider, always the burden that families eventually decided they couldn't handle. But everything changed when she knocked on the door of a broken-hearted rancher who was just as lost as she was. Jack Sullivan hadn't spoken to another person for days when Maya arrived at his isolated Wyoming ranch. 5 years earlier, a devastating tragedy had shattered his world, leaving him alone on thousands of acres with only his cattle and his grief for company. He'd agreed to let Maya stay temporarily, just a few weeks until social services could find her somewhere else to go. Neither of them expected what happened next. This isn't just a story about finding shelter. It's about two wounded souls who discovered that sometimes the most beautiful homes are built not with money or obligation, but with patience, understanding, and the courage to care again. What Jack decides to build for Maya will restore your faith in humanity and show you that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the choice to stay, to invest, and to create something permanent in a world that feels temporary. But before we begin this incredible journey together, I need your help to keep sharing stories that matter. If you believe in the power of human kindness and second chances, please hit that subscribe button right now. It's completely free and helps more people discover these inspiring stories. And don't forget to like this video if you're ready to have your heart touched, and comment below to let me know. Have you ever met someone who changed your life when you least expected it? Your engagement means everything and helps us continue bringing you stories of hope and transformation. Now, let me take you to a windswept ranch in Wyoming, where a simple act of kindness is about to change 2 lives forever. The October wind swept across the Wyoming plains with the fierce persistence of a wild Mustang, carrying with it the scent of dried grass and the promise of an early winter. Maya Rodriguez clutched her threadbare jacket tighter around her 17-year-old frame as she stood before the weathered wooden gate of Sullivan Ranch, its paint peeling like old scars revealing the raw wood beneath. The rusted metal hinges groaned in protest against the gusting wind, creating a melancholy symphony that seemed to echo the uncertainty churning in her chest. Her fingers, already numb from the biting cold despite it being only mid-afternoon, fumbled with the corroded latch. The metal was rough against her skin, and she had to work it back and forth several times before it finally gave way with a reluctant click that seemed to resonate across the vast emptiness surrounding her. This was her 7th placement in 3 years. Each previous attempt at stability had crumbled like autumn leaves beneath the weight of broken promises and good intentions gone awry. The dirt road stretched before her like a question mark, winding its way through rolling pastures that seemed to extend beyond the horizon. Black Angus cattle dotted the landscape, their dark forms moving slowly through the golden grass that swayed hypnotically in the persistent breeze. The animals lifted their heads occasionally to regard her with mild curiosity before returning to their grazing, unbothered by the arrival of yet another lost soul seeking shelter. Maya shouldered her worn canvas duffel bag, the same one she'd carried from placement to placement, its green fabric faded to an indeterminate color and its zipper held together with safety pins in 2 places. The bag contained the entirety of her worldly possessions, 3 changes of clothes carefully folded and refolded countless times, a battered leather journal filled with her thoughts and dreams, a small music box with a ballerina whose pink tutu had long since faded to white, and a photograph of her mother, the only tangible proof that someone had once loved her unconditionally. The farmhouse ahead was modest but well-maintained, its white clapboard siding showing signs of recent touch-ups and its green metal roof gleaming despite the overcast sky. A wraparound porch extended across the front and around one side, its wooden planks worn smooth by years of Wyoming weather but solid beneath the weight of 2 rocking chairs that sat motionless in the stillness. Flower boxes beneath the front windows held the dried remnants of what had once been a cheerful display of petunias and marigolds, now brittle and brown but somehow still clinging to life. As Maya approached the house, her trained eye automatically cataloged details that would help her navigate this new environment. The porch steps were sturdy, no creaking boards to avoid during late-night trips to the bathroom. The front door's paint was fresh, suggesting someone who cared about appearances, or at least about maintaining their property. Most importantly, there were no toys scattered about, no bicycles abandoned on the lawn, no signs of the chaos that usually accompanied families overwhelmed by their existing responsibilities and the addition of a foster child. Jack Sullivan emerged from the red barn situated about 50 yards from the house, his tall, lean frame moving with the purposeful gait of a man accustomed to physical labor. At 42, his face bore the deep lines and weathered complexion of someone who had spent decades working under the relentless Wyoming sun. His brown hair, liberally streaked with premature gray, stuck out from beneath a well-worn baseball cap advertising a local feed store. His gray eyes, the color of storm clouds building on the horizon, held a wariness that Maya recognized immediately. It was the same careful distance she saw in her own reflection. He'd agreed to this temporary arrangement only after persistent pressure from his sister Claire, who worked for the county's social services department and had run out of other options for Maya. The conversation had been brief and reluctant. "Just until we can find her something more permanent, Jack. She's a good kid, just needs a place to land for a few weeks." "You must be Maya," he said, his voice carrying the roughness of someone unaccustomed to regular conversation. Living alone for the past 5 years had stripped away the social graces that once came naturally, leaving him more comfortable with the low moo of cattle and the whisper of wind through grass than with human interaction. "Thank you for letting me stay, Mr. Sullivan," Maya replied, her voice carefully modulated to project gratitude without desperation. "I understand this is just temporary." The words came easily after years of practice, though they left a familiar bitter taste in her mouth. She'd learned to manage expectations, both her own and those of the people kind enough to offer her shelter, by establishing the temporary nature of every arrangement from the moment she walked through the door. Jack studied her for a moment, taking in her defensive posture and the way she held herself slightly apart, as if ready to bolt at the first sign of rejection. He recognized something of himself in her stance, the careful isolation of someone who had learned that carrying too much led inevitably to pain. "There's a spare room upstairs," he said, gesturing toward the house with a work-hardened hand that bore fresh scratches from morning fence repairs. "Bathrooms down the hall. I usually eat around 6, there's always enough for 2 if you're hungry." The offer was made without fanfare, a simple statement of fact rather than an attempt at hospitality. As they walked toward the house, Maya found herself genuinely noticing her surroundings for the first time since climbing out of Claire's car. Most placements involved urban or suburban environments, cramped apartments, cookie-cutter subdivisions, the constant hum of traffic and neighbors living too close together. This was different. The silence here was profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through grass and the occasional lowing of cattle in the distance. Wildflowers, Indian paintbrush and purple lupin, dotted the fence line like scattered jewels, their vibrant colors made more striking by the muted palette of autumn grass and gray sky. An enormous oak tree dominated the front yard, its thick trunk scarred by decades of weather and its massive branches casting intricate shadows across the porch. The tree was clearly ancient, probably planted by Jack's grandparents or great-grandparents when they first settled this land. "How long have you lived here?" Maya asked, partly from genuine curiosity but mostly to fill the silence that seemed to press against them both with uncomfortable weight. "Inherited it from my parents 15 years ago," Jack replied, pausing at the bottom of the porch steps. "Been working it since I was about your age, though. Started helping Dad with chores when I was 12, never really stopped." There was pride in his voice when he spoke of the land, the first genuine emotion Maya had heard from him. "What happened to your last placement?" he asked, his directness catching her slightly off guard. Maya's jaw tightened involuntarily, and she felt the familiar knot of hurt and anger form in her stomach. "The Hendersons decided they weren't ready for the commitment," she said carefully. "Said I was too independent for a 17-year-old. The truth was far more complicated and painful. She'd overheard them late one night, discussing the monthly stipend they received for her care and whether it was worth the hassle of having a teenager who didn't engage socially and preferred books to family game nights. The conversation had reduced her to a financial transaction, a burden to be weighed against benefits, and she'd packed her bag that very night, informing Claire the next morning that the placement wasn't working out. The interior of Jack's house reflected his solitary lifestyle with stark clarity. The rooms were clean and organized but felt more like a museum than a home. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece in the living room, wedding pictures, baby photos, holiday gatherings, but Jack's eyes carefully avoided them as they passed through. The kitchen, clearly the heart of the home in better times, now showed the telltale signs of a man eating alone. A single plate and cup in the dish drainer, a small coffee pot that made just enough for one person, and a dining table that served more as a desk for ranch paperwork than a place for meals. "I'll try not to be in your way," Maya said quietly, recognizing the careful isolation Jack had constructed around himself. She understood the need for emotional barriers, the way solitude could become both protection and prison. "Just mind the hot water heater," Jack replied. "It's old, so if you want a decent shower, don't wait too long after I've used it in the morning." That first evening established a pattern that would define their early coexistence. Dinner was prepared without fanfare, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from a can, and eaten in comfortable silence at the kitchen counter. Maya watched through the window as Jack made his evening rounds, checking on the horses in the corral behind the barn. She noticed the gentle way he handled the animals, speaking to them in low, soothing tones as he checked their water and hay. There was kindness there, buried beneath layers of grief and self-protection, and Maya filed the observation away with the dozen other small details that would help her navigate this new environment. As darkness settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, Maya climbed the creaking stairs to her temporary room. It was simple but comfortable, a single bed with a patchwork quilt that looked handmade, a small dresser with a mirror that reflected the room's single window, and a wooden chair that had seen better days but was still sturdy enough to hold her weight. The window faced east, offering a view of the pastures and, beyond them, the shadowy outline of mountains in the distance. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Maya opened her journal and tried to process the day's events. This placement felt different from the others, quieter, less chaotic, but also more uncertain. With families, she'd known what was expected: gratitude, minimal disruption, eventual integration into their established routines. With Jack, the expectations weren't clear. He seemed content to let her exist in parallel to his life rather than trying to force her into it. The old house settled around her with gentle creaks and sighs, the sounds of a structure that had weathered decades of Wyoming winters and summers. Through her window, stars began to emerge in the vast sky, more brilliant than any she'd seen in years of urban and suburban placements. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light, and for the first time in months, Maya felt something approaching peace. Maybe this placement would last longer than the others. Maybe Jack Sullivan, with his quiet ways and hidden kindness, was different from the well-meaning families who had taken her in and eventually given up. Maybe here, in this isolated corner of Wyoming, she could find something resembling stability. But experience had taught her to guard her hope carefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to disappoint or be disappointed. Tonight, though, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to truly belong somewhere, to be more than a temporary inconvenience or a monthly check from social services. The wind continued to whisper across the plains, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of snow. Maya pulled her thin blanket closer and whispered a prayer to whatever force might be listening. "Please let this one work out." 3 weeks into her stay, Maya had established a careful routine. She rose before dawn to help with morning chores, attended school via online courses at the kitchen table, and spent afternoons exploring the property's boundaries. Jack remained politely distant, but she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. The October morning that changed everything started like any other. Maya was mucking stalls when she overheard Jack's phone conversation with his sister, Claire. "It's temporary, Claire. You know that. I'm not equipped for this long term." His voice carried the weight of old wounds. Maya's hands stilled on the pitchfork. The familiar knot of rejection twisted in her stomach. She'd been foolish to hope this might be different. Later that day, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Maya sat on the back porch steps, her journal open but blank. Writing usually helped her process emotions, but today the words wouldn't come. Jack found her there as the first raindrops began to fall. "You'll catch pneumonia out here," he said, settling beside her on the step. "I've survived worse," Maya replied, her voice flat. They sat in silence as the rain intensified, drumming against the porch roof. Finally, Jack spoke. "You heard my conversation with Claire." It wasn't a question. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "I lost my wife and daughter 5 years ago," Jack said quietly. "Car accident on a night just like this. Sarah was pregnant. We were going to name the baby Hope." His hands clenched into fists. "After that, I couldn't. I didn't want anyone depending on me again." Maya turned to study his profile, seeing the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "The thing is," Jack continued, "watching you these past weeks, you remind me that hope doesn't always end in loss. Sometimes it just means having the courage to try again." The rain was coming down harder now, but neither moved to go inside. There was something sacred about this moment of shared vulnerability. "I've been in 17 different placements since I was 12, Maya said. "Foster homes, group homes, relatives who didn't really want me. Each time, I thought maybe this would be the place I could finally stop running." "What happened to your parents?" "Mom died when I was 8. Overdose. Never knew my dad." Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, but Jack heard the buried pain. "The system tried its best, but I was never the easy kid families wanted. Too old, too damaged, too much trouble." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "You're not trouble, Maya. You're just a kid who needs a chance." That evening, as the storm raged outside, Jack made a decision that surprised them both. He found Maya in the living room, reading by lamplight. "What if it wasn't temporary?" he asked without preamble. Maya looked up, her heart stuttering. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stayed? Not as a placement, but as family." The words seemed to catch in his throat. "I know I'm not much for conversation, and this place is pretty isolated, but you'd want that?" Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. Jack sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly. "I think we both need to stop running from the possibility of caring about someone again." For the first time in years, Maya felt tears of hope rather than disappointment. "I'd like that, Mr. Sullivan. I'd like that very much." "Jack," he corrected gently. "Just Jack." Outside, the storm began to clear, and through the window, they could see stars emerging between the scattered clouds. By November, Maya and Jack had settled into an easy partnership. The legal proceedings for guardianship were underway, but more importantly, they were learning to be a family. Maya's online courses were going well, and she'd even started helping Jack with the ranch's bookkeeping. Her foster care experience had taught her to be resourceful with limited resources. The idea came to Jack on a crisp morning when he found Maya shivering in the kitchen, wrapped in blankets while trying to study. The old house's heating system was struggling, and her upstairs room was always the coldest. "That's it," he muttered, startling Maya. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking up from her math assignment. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." Jack's eyes held an excitement she'd never seen before. "Come with me." He led her outside to a level spot about 50 yards from the main house, near the old oak tree. The morning sun filtered through the remaining leaves, casting golden patterns on the grass. "What do you see here?" Jack asked. Maya looked around, confused. Grass?" "The tree. I see a foundation. For a house." "Your house." Maya's breath caught. "My house. A real home, Maya. Not a spare room or a temporary fix. Something that's yours, that no one can take away." Jack's voice was filled with conviction. "I've been thinking about it for weeks. The main house holds too many memories for me to change much, but this could be a fresh start for both of us." "Jack, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He turned to face her fully. "You've brought life back to this place, Maya. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. Now I wake up with purpose again." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. "But the cost? I've got savings and the ranch does well enough. Besides," Jack smiled, "I'm pretty handy with construction. Built that barn when I was in my 20s. Over the following days, Jack threw himself into planning. He sketched blueprints at the kitchen table, researching efficient heating systems and modern insulation. Maya watched in amazement as her cautious guardian transformed into an enthusiastic architect. 2 bedrooms, Jack explained, showing her his latest drawing. One for you now, one for a study, or maybe someday when you're older and have your own family visiting. The casual reference to a future where Maya would still be part of his life made her chest tight with emotion. No one had ever planned beyond the immediate necessity of housing her. And look here, Jack continued, pointing to the sketch. A big window facing east so you can watch the sunrise. And a covered porch where you can sit with your journal. You notice everything, Maya said softly. That's what family does, Jack replied simply. They broke ground on a Saturday in late November. Claire came out to help, bringing her husband and teenage sons. Maya was nervous about meeting Jack's extended family, but Claire hugged her warmly. Jack's told me so much about you, Claire said. I haven't seen him this happy in years. As they worked together, digging, measuring, laughing at Jack's increasingly elaborate plans, Maya felt something she'd never experienced before, the security of belonging. These people were investing time and effort into her future, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Hey Maya, called Jamie, Claire's younger son. Uncle Jack says you're thinking about studying agriculture in college. That's cool. College. Another concept that had always seemed impossibly distant. But here was Jack, planning not just her immediate shelter but her long-term dreams. That evening, as they sat around a campfire near the construction site, Jack pulled out his guitar, an instrument Maya hadn't known he played. Sarah used to love it when I played, he said quietly. Haven't touched it since. But as he strummed the first chords of an old folk song, Maya saw something shift in his expression. The music wasn't bringing back pain, it was creating new memories. My mom used to sing to me, Maya said, before things got bad. What was her favorite song? Jack asked. Maya hummed a few bars of a lullaby, her voice soft and uncertain. Jack listened, then began to play along, his fingers finding the melody. For the first time in years, Maya sang her mother's lullaby, but this time it wasn't a song of loss. It was a song of hope, of new beginnings, of family found in the most unexpected places. The small house took shape through the winter months, growing from foundation to frame to walls. Maya marveled at how something so solid could emerge from Jack's careful planning and patient work. On weekends, Claire's family would drive out to help, turning the construction into community gatherings filled with laughter and shared meals. Maya's 18th birthday in February was celebrated not with the institutional acknowledgement she'd expected, but with a cake Claire baked and a small party in the unfinished house. Standing in what would soon be her living room, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her future, Maya felt the last of her defensive walls crumble. I have something for you, Jack said, handing her an envelope. Inside were the official guardianship papers, and something else. A deed. Made out in her name. Jack, I can't. You can and you will, he said firmly. This land, this house, it's yours legally. No one can ever take it away or make you leave. Maya stared at the document, her hands shaking. But what if something happens to you? Then you'll still have a home, Jack said simply. That's what real family does, Maya. We make sure you're taken care of, no matter what. The house was finished in early April, just as the wildflowers began to bloom along the fence line. It was modest but perfect. A kitchen with a window overlooking Jack's vegetable garden, a living room with built-in bookshelves, and that east-facing bedroom window Jack had promised. Moving day was simple. Maya didn't have much to move, but Jack had quietly furnished the house with care. A comfortable reading chair by the window. A desk for her studies. A music box, not the broken one from her childhood, but a new one that played her mother's lullaby. I thought you might want to start fresh, Jack said when he saw her tears. That first night in her own home, Maya stood on her porch looking across the pasture toward Jack's house. The lights were on in his kitchen, and she could see him reading at the table, probably researching some new improvement for the ranch. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jack. Light on in your window looks good from here. Sleep well, kiddo. Maya smiled, typing back, "Thank you. For everything." "Thank you too," came his reply. "For reminding me that family isn't just what you're born into, it's what you choose to build." 6 months later, Maya started classes at the University of Wyoming, studying sustainable agriculture with plans to help modernize the ranch. She commuted from her little house, coming home each evening to the sound of Jack's cattle and the sight of her vegetable garden flourishing under the vast Wyoming sky. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would sit on her porch together, the gruff rancher and the girl who'd been passed around for shelter. They would talk about the day's work, about Maya's classes, about plans for expanding the ranch's sustainable practices. "You know," Maya said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains purple, "I used to think home was just a place where people let you stay. But it's not, is it?" Jack shook his head. "Home is where people choose to keep you, where they invest in your future instead of just managing your present." Maya looked at her little house, at the thriving garden, at the man who'd become the father she'd never had. "I used to be afraid of hoping for too much," she said. "But you taught me that sometimes the best things come when you're brave enough to build something real together." "Speaking of building," Jack said with a grin, "I've been thinking about adding a workshop to your place. Somewhere you can tinker with those hydroponic systems you're always reading about." Maya laughed, shaking her head. "Always planning the next project." "That's what family does," Jack said, echoing his words from months before. "We keep building, keep improving, keep making sure everyone has what they need to thrive." As the stars emerged in the clear Wyoming sky, Maya felt a deep contentment settle in her chest. She was no longer the girl who'd been passed around for shelter. She was Maya Sullivan, not by birth, but by choice, by love, by the patient construction of trust and hope. She had found her home, and more importantly, she had learned to build one. The end.